History remembers Rome as the greatest empire on earth, but inside the imperial palace, the story was very different. Behind golden crowns and marble halls lived emperors feared even by their own guards. Some were worshipped as gods, others were killed by the people closest to them. Tonight, we uncover the secret life of Rome's emperors. Chapter 1. The Palace of Secrets. For the most powerful men in the ancient world, the greatest danger often lived inside their own home. High above the city of Rome stood the imperial palace on the legendary Palatine Hill. From here, the emperor ruled an empire that stretched across 3 continents. Marble halls gleamed under torchlight, fountains whispered in the courtyards, and servants moved quietly through endless corridors. To the outside world, it was a symbol of unmatched power and glory. But inside the palace walls, another reality existed. The palace was not just a home for the emperor. It was the political heart of the Roman Empire. Senators arrived with carefully chosen words. Generals waited for commands that could decide the fate of entire provinces. Messengers brought news from distant frontiers, from Britain to Syria. Every decision made inside these chambers could change the course of history. Yet with that power came something far darker: fear. Emperors quickly learned that absolute power created absolute enemies. Every ambitious senator, every overlooked general, and even members of the emperor's own family could become potential threats. In Rome, loyalty was often temporary, and trust was a rare luxury. At night, when the feasts were over and the torches burned low, the palace corridors grew quiet. But the danger never truly disappeared. Behind closed doors, whispers spread through the court. Servants carried rumors from one chamber to another. Advisors spoke in careful, guarded voices. A careless word could destroy a career, or worse, attract the suspicion of the emperor himself. For the emperor, sleep rarely came easily. Even surrounded by guards, many rulers knew that the most dangerous conspiracies were often born within the palace itself. The men assigned to protect the emperor, the powerful Praetorian Guard, were also capable of turning against him if the political winds shifted. History would prove this again and again. Several Roman emperors who ruled from this palace never expected the moment their power would suddenly end. A trusted ally could become an assassin. A loyal guard could become a conspirator. And a quiet conversation in a shadowed hallway could grow into a deadly plot. The palace on Palatine Hill looked magnificent to the citizens of Rome below. Its towering walls and golden roofs symbolized the strength of an empire that ruled the known world. But inside those walls, power was fragile. Because in Rome, the throne did not only grant absolute authority, it also placed a target on the emperor's back. Chapter 2. When power becomes madness. Absolute power can change a man. In ancient Rome, it sometimes destroyed him. When a new emperor first took the throne of the Roman Empire, hope often filled the air. Senators spoke of stability, citizens expected strong leadership, and soldiers pledged loyalty to their new ruler. Many emperors began their reign with promise, young, ambitious, and determined to prove themselves worthy of Rome's immense power. But ruling the greatest empire of the ancient world came with a burden few could truly handle. An emperor controlled the armies, the treasury, the laws, and even the lives of Rome's citizens. His word could build cities, start wars, or condemn powerful men to death. In theory, the Senate still existed, but in reality, the emperor stood above almost everyone. And when one person holds that much authority, something dangerous can begin to happen. Isolation. Inside the imperial palace on Palatine Hill, emperors slowly became separated from the ordinary world. Their days were filled with ceremonies, advisors, and endless political tension. Every visitor approached them carefully, often speaking only the words they believed the emperor wanted to hear. Honest criticism became rare. Instead, the emperor heard constant praise, sometimes genuine, but often driven by fear. Courtiers applauded every decision. Poets praised the emperor's wisdom. Officials competed to prove their loyalty. Over time, this environment could distort reality itself. When no one dares to challenge your decisions, it becomes easy to believe you are always right. When thousands of people bow before you, it becomes easy to believe you are more than human. For some Roman emperors, this transformation happened slowly. Suspicion began to replace trust. Advisors who once seemed loyal suddenly appeared dangerous. Friends became potential rivals. Even family members could look like threats to the throne. Paranoia spread through the palace like a silent disease. Emperors began surrounding themselves with guards, watching the behavior of senators, and listening carefully to rumors whispered through the court. A careless comment, a political disagreement, or even a strange look could spark deadly consequences. And as fear grew, the emperor's behavior sometimes grew stranger as well. Lavish celebrations became more extravagant. Punishments became harsher. Decisions that once seemed rational turned unpredictable. What had once been a confident ruler could slowly transform into a man driven by suspicion, anger, or obsession. The Roman court understood this pattern all too well. Senators and officials watched carefully, knowing that the emperor's mood could determine their survival. A ruler admired one year could become feared the next. Because in Rome, the line between powerful leader and dangerous ruler was often very thin. And once that line was crossed, the entire empire would feel the consequences. Chapter 3. Caligula, Rome's most unpredictable emperor. What happens when the most powerful man in the world stops believing he is human? In the year 37 AD, a young ruler stepped onto the throne of the Roman Empire. His name was Caligula, and at first, the people of Rome welcomed him with hope and celebration. The young emperor had grown up around soldiers and military camps, earning the affectionate nickname Caligula, meaning little boots, from the tiny army sandals he wore as a child. To many Romans, he seemed energetic, charismatic, and ready to lead the empire into a new era. But the promise of his early reign would not last long. Only months after becoming emperor, Caligula suffered a severe illness. Ancient historians later wrote that when he recovered, something about him seemed different. Whether it was illness, the crushing pressure of power, or simply his true personality finally emerging, the emperor's behavior began to shock the entire Roman court. Caligula did not merely rule Rome, he demanded to be worshipped. According to several ancient sources, he began presenting himself as a living god. Statues of deities were sometimes altered to resemble his face. Temples were ordered to honor him, and courtiers were expected to treat the emperor not just as a ruler, but as a divine figure. For the proud Roman elite, this was deeply humiliating. The senators of Rome had long seen themselves as guardians of the republic's ancient traditions. Even under the emperors, they still believed they deserved respect and influence. Caligula, however, seemed to enjoy challenging and mocking their authority. At public gatherings, he reportedly insulted powerful senators. He forced members of the elite to run beside his chariot during ceremonial processions. Some historians even describe elaborate banquets where the emperor treated Rome's most important men like nervous performers in his personal theater. Inside the imperial palace on Palatine Hill, fear began to spread. No one could predict what the emperor might do next. One day he might reward a courtier with wealth and honors. The next day he might accuse that same person of disloyalty. In an empire where the emperor's word carried absolute authority, even a rumor could become a death sentence. As Caligula's rule continued, the tension inside Rome's political circles grew more dangerous. Behind closed doors, senators whispered about the emperor's behavior. Advisors spoke cautiously, measuring every word. And within the powerful Praetorian Guard, the very soldiers responsible for protecting the emperor began to question their loyalty. Because in Rome, when a ruler became too unpredictable, survival sometimes meant removing him. And for Caligula, the palace that once symbolized his absolute power would soon become the place where his reign and his life came to a sudden and violent end. Chapter 4. Nero and the Theater of Power. What do you do when you are emperor of the world, but your heart belongs to the stage? In the year 54 AD, Nero ascended to the throne of the Roman Empire, a young man full of ambition, charm, and energy. To the public, he promised stability and greatness. Yet, behind the palace walls, a very different story unfolded. One where art, obsession, and political danger collided. Nero was not like the emperors who came before him. While the empire demanded careful governance, military strategy, and lawmaking, he found his passion in music, poetry, and performance. He sang on stage, played the lyre, and even competed in public contests, acts considered inappropriate for someone who ruled the most powerful empire on earth. The citizens of Rome were both fascinated and disturbed. To see an emperor perform on stage, dressed in costume, seemed absurd to many. Senators and generals, who had been accustomed to more disciplined leadership, whispered their disapproval in the shadowed corridors of the imperial palace on Palatine Hill. But Nero's love of performance was only part of his story. Power in Rome was never simple. His court was filled with intrigue, and enemies lurked behind every corner. Advisors, family members, and senators all jostled for influence, each seeking to bend the young emperor to their will, or remove him entirely. The infamous fire of 64 AD became one of the defining moments of Nero's reign. As the city of Rome burned, rumors spread that Nero himself had played the lyre while watching the flames consume the city. Whether true or exaggerated by historians, the stories cemented his reputation as a ruler more concerned with spectacle than governance. The fire also provided an opportunity for Nero to target political rivals, blaming Christians and other groups for the disaster and solidifying his control through fear and propaganda. Within the palace, tension was constant. Advisors carefully measured every word they spoke. Senators moved with caution, aware that the emperor's favor could vanish overnight. The Praetorian Guard, sworn to protect Nero, were also drawn into the swirling conspiracies and plots, forced to navigate the emperor's unpredictability. Nero's reign demonstrates the fragile line between brilliance and madness. His life was a theater where art and absolute power collided, and the empire itself became a stage for his ambitions, desires, and fears. In the end, the story of Nero shows that ruling Rome was not just about commanding armies or making laws. It was about surviving the whispers, rumors, and plots that constantly surrounded the throne. Because in the empire's glittering palace, the show was never over, and the consequences of missteps could be fatal. Chapter 5. Conspiracies in the Dark. In Rome, the closest ally could be the deadliest enemy. The imperial palace on Palatine Hill was more than a home. It was a battlefield. Beneath its gilded ceilings and lavish decorations, whispers of betrayal echoed through every corridor. Senators, generals, and even trusted guards plotted in silence, knowing that the emperor's favor could vanish overnight. In this palace, power was intoxicating, but danger was constant. For centuries, the Roman throne had been both the ultimate prize and the deadliest trap. Emperors who commanded armies, controlled wealth, and dictated law also lived under the constant threat of betrayal. No one knew this better than the elite within the palace walls. Senators, who once debated policies in the open courts of Rome, now whispered in shadowed hallways, their words carefully chosen. Ambitious generals who had won victories for Rome quietly weighed the risks of loyalty versus ambition, and the Praetorian Guard, charged with the emperor's protection, often became the hidden instruments of conspiracy. Plots took many forms. Some were subtle, carefully planted rumors, secret alliances, or favors granted and revoked to manipulate influence. Others were deadly, poisoned cups, ambushes in dimly lit corridors, or carefully timed assassinations. A single misstep, a word spoken out of turn, could mean exile, disgrace, or death. Even emperors who seemed secure were not immune. Caligula, for example, was known for his unpredictability, but even he feared those around him. Nero, obsessed with performance and indulgence, became surrounded by scheming officials who waited for any sign of weakness. And the palace itself became a chessboard where every player calculated their move with deadly precision. The danger was not always obvious. Smiles in the dining hall could mask daggered intentions. Servants who appeared loyal often served multiple masters. Advisors who spoke kindly in the morning might conspire by night. In Rome, it was not the battles on distant frontiers that toppled emperors. It was the quiet, invisible war waged within their own palace. Conspiracies also bred paranoia. Emperors learned to trust almost no one. Guards watched the movements of courtiers. Senators watched each other. Every glance, every whisper, every delayed bow could signal a brewing plot. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and the emperor's life became a constant test of perception and intuition. By the end of the day, the palace stood as a monument not only to Rome's power, but also to its peril. Golden walls and marble floors hid secrets darker than any battlefield. Because in the heart of the empire, survival depended less on strength or strategy, and more on navigating the shadows of human ambition. In Rome, the greatest threat to an emperor was rarely a foreign army. It was the hand reaching out from the dark, just beside him. Chapter 6. The Night of Assassins. In Rome, the night could be deadlier than the battlefield. For the emperors of the Roman Empire, power came with luxury, but also a price few could imagine. Behind the palace walls on Palatine Hill, assassination was not an occasional threat. It was a constant reality. Every shadow could hide a conspirator. Every cup might carry poison, and every whispered conversation could end a reign. Throughout history, many rulers ascended the throne only to discover that survival depended as much on vigilance as on strategy. Some emperors, like Caligula and Nero, surrounded themselves with guards and advisors, but that protection could quickly turn fatal. The same men sworn to defend. The emperor could be persuaded, bribed or coerced into striking the fatal blow. The methods of assassination were as varied as they were sinister. Poisoned wine or meals were a favorite tool, simple, silent, and often impossible to trace. Daggers hidden in clothing allowed conspirators to strike at close range, leaving no witnesses but the dying emperor. Even staged accidents, from falls to manipulated chariots, were employed to remove rulers without the scandal of open bloodshed. Palace coups were another common threat. Generals or senators could rally supporters in secret, seizing key parts of the city to control access to the emperor. Guards loyal to the conspirators might block exits, isolate the ruler, and ensure that no help could arrive in time. These events often unfolded in complete darkness, leaving little room for the emperor to defend himself. Fear was constant. Emperors learned to sleep lightly, to question every gesture, and to doubt the loyalty of those closest to them. Even family members could pose a threat. Brothers, uncles, or ambitious children might see assassination as a path to power. In Rome, trust was a dangerous gamble, and the wrong decision could be fatal. The psychological toll of this constant danger was immense. Some emperors became paranoid, isolated, and unpredictable. Others, aware of the threats surrounding them, grew cold, calculating, and merciless, believing that only preemptive strikes could ensure survival. The palace, with its golden walls and opulent halls, became a prison where life and death were decided by intrigue and guile rather than strength or honor. By sunrise, the emperor who survived the night might appear unshaken, but the shadow of assassination always lingered. Those who fell became cautionary tales, remembered for their power and for the sudden, violent ends they met in the very palace that symbolized Rome's glory. In the empire's heart, the night was never quiet. It was a theater of danger, where the price of absolute power was measured in lives, and no emperor could ever afford to sleep peacefully. Chapter 7. The Price of Absolute Power. Power is intoxicating, but in Rome, it came with a deadly price. The emperors of the Roman Empire ruled over the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. From the rolling hills of Britain to the deserts of Egypt, their word was law. Their decisions shaped the lives of millions, and their wealth seemed limitless. Yet behind the grandeur of their palaces on Palatine Hill, a far darker reality defined their existence: fear. Absolute authority offered unimaginable freedom, but it also isolated rulers from everyone around them. Friends became rivals, family became potential enemies, and even the men sworn to protect them, the Praetorian Guard, could be bribed, coerced, or persuaded to turn against them. Trust was a luxury few emperors could afford. History shows that many who sought power underestimated this danger. Caligula trusted few and alienated many, yet even he was eventually struck down by those closest to him. Nero pursued personal passions at the expense of statecraft, leaving conspiracies to fester unchecked around him. In Rome, the higher one climbed, the steeper and deadlier the fall. The palace itself symbolized this paradox. Marble halls, golden ceilings, and lavish feasts projected strength and stability to the outside world. But inside, the corridors were silent witnesses to plotting, paranoia, and betrayal. Emperors were never truly alone, yet the company they kept often brought danger closer than any foreign enemy could. Even the simplest decisions could have fatal consequences. A favor given to one courtier might anger another. A policy meant to strengthen the empire could trigger a conspiracy. In a world where assassination, poison, and coups were common tools, the line between power and vulnerability was razor thin. This constant threat shaped the emperors psychologically as much as it did politically. Many grew cautious, calculating, and suspicious, seeing enemies in every shadow. Some embraced cruelty as a defense, striking first before being struck. Others retreated into art, indulgence, or madness, seeking escape from the relentless tension of ruling an empire. And yet, despite the danger, Rome's emperors continued to seize the throne. For power was irresistible, even when it meant walking a path lined with peril. Every decision carried weight, every moment held risk, and every sunrise brought new challenges, and sometimes new assassins. The history of Rome teaches a harsh truth. The throne that promised ultimate power also guaranteed vulnerability. To rule the world was to live constantly on the edge of fear, where every whisper could threaten a life and every ally could hide a dagger. In the end, absolute power may seem glorious, but in the heart of Rome, it always came at the highest possible cost. If you want to keep uncovering the dark secrets and hidden stories of history, make sure to subscribe to Midnight Empire and hit the notification bell so you never miss a journey into the shadows of power, intrigue, and empire.